Hey guys, Will here. So today we're going to be taking a look at the BDH H1 Bazooka sim racing shifter. Now the approach with this product is a little bit different from a lot of the sim racing products that we've looked at here in the past. Usually when we're looking at a product, it's pretty obvious to tell that they're built to a certain price point. So there'll be certain sacrifices made in terms of build quality, materials, to make something come in at a price point that's appropriate for the customer that they're wanting to sell it to. Now the approach with the BDH shifter is quite different. Billy and Dave from BDH, who originally were actually hand making these things themselves, have gone out and tried to make this thing as realistic as it can possibly be. And then whatever the price ended up being at the end of that process was the price for the shifter. So it certainly isn't a cheap piece of sim racing hardware. Now you are getting what you pay for in terms of material quality, expertise that have actually gone into building this thing, but that's certainly not going to be the be all and end all for everybody out there. So today we're going to be taking a look at this objectively, seeing how it actually feels compared to some other shifters that we've recommended in the past. And by the end of today's video, you should have a good understanding of whether this might be the shifter for you. So let's dive in. Okay, so before we kick off today, firstly, big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Micro Center. Now, if you're in the US, you're probably already familiar with Micro Center as an amazing place to pick up all kinds of electronic gadgets and gizmos, from PC hardware all the way through to TVs and bits and pieces like that. What you might not know is that they also now range an expanding selection of sim racing products. Now, this is really exciting for us sim racers because it means you can finally get eyes on, and in some cases even hands-on, with a lot of the sim racing hardware that we review here on the channel before you spend your hard-earned cash. So they've got a bunch of exciting stuff going on at the moment. A new store opening in Charlotte in early 2024. They've got a bunch of winter savings as well over the Christmas period, and also a new customer exclusive where you can pick up a Creality Ender 3 S1 3D printer for just $149 US. So check them out via the links down in the description below, or visit your local Micro Center today. Okay, so just a couple of quick housekeeping things for you to be aware of before we kick off with today's review. So firstly, big thank you to Billy and Dave Hunter, BDH, for sending across their shifter for us to check out. They are a small business, so it is quite a significant thing for them to provide their sim racing gear to us for review, unlike a lot of the larger companies that have a lot more marketing budget. So we do really appreciate them sending this across for us to check out. Just so you guys are aware, the other shifters that we will be comparing to in today's video were sent to us under the exact same conditions as well. Now, they do have a couple of different resellers around the world. Some of those are affiliate partners of ours, some of them aren't. So we will have some links down in the description below. Some of those are affiliate links, so they will help support the channel if you choose to buy using those links. So we really do appreciate your support there. But as is always the case here, nobody has any sort of third-party input into anything that we're saying here. Everything I'm going to be talking about is purely just my own observations and my own opinions. So let's start off today with a little bit of background information on BDH. So BDH stands for Billy and Dave Hunter, a father and son team that were originally actually building these just in their own garage workshop. Now, they've got a bunch of experience building real-life gearboxes for real-life rally cars, I believe. And the feeling of this shifter was originally based on a Ford Escort rally car, and then later adapted to feel a little bit more like an old school MX-5 if you've ever driven one of those. So I actually used to have an NB MX-5 many years ago. Those who've been following the channel for a long time might remember that. And it does actually feel very authentic. It does feel very similar to the way that car felt. So they've obviously put a lot of time and effort into this. So if you've seen some of the older reviews of this shifter, you would know that they were originally machining all the parts themselves in their workshop. It would take them 2 weeks to machine all the parts by hand and assemble one of these guys. So since that time, they have actually expanded a little bit. They are now outsourcing some of the manufacturing and assembly. Now that's obviously something that's just necessary as you upscale a business. If you're only able to pump out one of these every 2 weeks, you can imagine if the demand is high, then the wait time is going to be absolutely massive. So good to see that they've been able to scale up the business in that manner. I know that they have had a few challenges over the years there, but they seem to have a really good thing nailed out now. The build quality of these things, as you'll see in today's video, is absolutely excellent. And look, I've gotten to know both Billy and Dave personally now over a number of years, and look, they're just really lovely, passionate guys that are really passionate about what they're doing here. So, and it really shows in the quality of the workmanship. So I wanted to give that little bit of background information before we get into pricing here, because it is a very expensive shifter, but I wanted you to understand the differences here in the manufacturing process, and that you're paying for a quality piece of workmanship and the expertise that goes into it, rather than just paying the maximum amount of money that a company can get away with for, you know, what might might not necessarily be something that physically costs that much to make. So let's get into pricing now. Of course, this may vary depending on where you are in the world and your relevant shipping and import taxes, so just be aware of that. But at the moment, if you search around online, you'll find this guy for €1,085 or 1,379.99 US dollars. That equates to about 965 British pounds. Or if you're in Australia like we are, you're looking at $1,834.48. So certainly not cheap. To put it in perspective, comparing across to some of the other shifters that we've looked at in the past here at Boosted Media, we'll start at the more expensive and work our way towards the cheaper. So if you're looking at the MME H-Pattern Plus sequential shifter, that's €749 on their website currently. The new SimMagic DS8X shifter comes in at $389.95 US dollars, and that is actually very, very, very good value for what you're getting here. We had a brief look at this in our SimMagic ecosystem overview video just recently. We will be diving into this in more detail very soon on the channel, so make sure you're subbed so you don't miss out on that. But very, very good value for money in this particular shifter. And then we have the old trusty Fanatic H-Pattern and sequential shifter, which is very, very old now. It's been around for a very long time, but it stood the test of time pretty well overall. It does a good job for what it is, and that guy comes in at $349.90 US. So quite a lot more expensive here for the BDH shifter, and it does have the disadvantage compared to all of these guys of not having an integrated sequential mode. So it is only an H-Pattern shifter. I believe they will be coming out at some point later on down the line with a sequential and H-Pattern shifter. I'm sure that's something that they must be working on in the background. Don't have any sort of time frame on that at this point in time. So it definitely does make this a more specialized piece of equipment. Now, I've seen a few people that own these that actually have sequential shifters mounted on their rig as well. For me personally, I prefer to have something that I can just alternate between the two because I am changing between different cars all the time. But whether or not that's going to be a deal breaker for you is going to be purely subjective and just based on what cars you're spending most of your time driving, but definitely an important differentiating factor here with the BDH shifter compared to all the other guys that we're going to be comparing to in today's video. So why would you spend this kind of money on a shifter? Now, we've already talked about the build quality in a little bit of detail, the workmanship and the expertise that go into this. So let's unpack that a little bit more before we get into what it's actually like to drive with. So what we're getting here is essentially a miniaturized version of a lot of the same kind of internal components that you would find in a real life gearbox. Now, if we slide off this back cover, I've just released a little grub screw which holds it in place. You can actually see some of the mechanical workings here and how everything kind of fits together. Now, I'm not going to open up this part here because there is a lot of componentry that goes into this, and I don't want to have things explode all over the table and then not be able to get them back in the way that they were originally assembled. But you can see down here, this little piece moves around with the shifter arm effectively. And these little pieces along the top here are essentially acting like a gate. So you can see as I move the shifter, this piece moves around and then we push it into each position. Now, one of the things that I did notice over the period that we were testing this guy out is that this little piece here in particular did tend to want to unwind itself. Now, I did end up cranking it down a little bit stiffer than it may have originally been from factory. But what happens is this kind of winds its way out and then it gets to a certain point where you can't shift past it anymore. So what I found, I was driving and it suddenly didn't want to go into first or second gear anymore. And all it was just that little piece that had come slowly unwound over time. So it was easily rectified. I just put a little bit more torque on it than it may have had from the factory and it didn't come undone again. So it's been absolutely fine. But if you have had that same problem, if you own one of these, let us know down in the comments down below. So if you get in there, you can see a series of little micro switches and each position is effectively just activating each micro switch. And it's as simple as that. So electronically, it's a very basic design. The electronics are actually housed inside this little housing down here, and that actually looks like this. So this is a little electronic controller board. You can actually pick these up for a couple of dollars off eBay. Now, the reason I know this and the reason I have a second controller board here is I did actually have to buy a replacement controller board and cable. So one of the things you'll notice here is that the cable is actually integrated into the electronics. So it does have a little plug on it, but it's not just a standard USB cable, which you can buy off the shelf, which was a little bit disappointing. I do much prefer the ability to just plug in a USB cable into the device. So if the cable ever does get damaged, you can easily replace it. Now, in case you're wondering, I did have the same complaint with the MME shifter that does have an integrated cable. The SimMagic and the Fanatic ones that we have on the table here both have separate cables that you can change over if you need to. So yeah, this cable is integrated. It plugs into the circuit board internally, but you can see where it comes out. Actually, you guys can't see. Let me spin that around for you. You can see the way it comes out here is just through this little strain relief like that. So you can't easily just change that cable. You do have to pull it apart to swap it over. And yeah, basically what happened is the cable was wrapped around inside the box, and then when it's been bumped around in shipping, it's kind of rubbed up against this, this semi-sharp edge that we have on the base plate here. And you can see it's actually cut through the cable there. So we needed to replace that. And the easiest way in Australia to replace it, obviously if we'd been in Europe or the UK, they would have just sent us out a replacement, but it was actually easier for us in Australia here to just buy a replacement board ourselves off eBay and swap it out. So look, it certainly wasn't the case where they left us to rectify that ourselves. They were perfectly happy to send us out a replacement cable and electronics board, but it was actually just faster for us to source it ourselves here in Australia because we're on the opposite side of the world from the guys at BDH over in the UK. So that is that. We'll quickly pop this housing back on here and I'll tighten up the little tiny grub screw in the bottom. So let's get into the specifics now. So what we have here is a 6-speed +2 style shifter. So we've got our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we have a lockout system, and you'll notice that it's set really loose at the moment, so I can move it around on the table. We'll talk about adjustment in just a minute. But then we have a lockout style system where if we have the shifter in this orientation, we push further over to the side and it allows us to jump into either our 7th gear or reverse, depending on how you want to calibrate it. Now you do just plug and play this guy. There's no drivers or anything like that. You just literally plug it in, map the gears to their relative positions that you want inside your sim, and you're good to go. So very, very simple. One thing that I do want to explain here, and something that I've seen a couple of reviewers get wrong here, is that the orientation of the shifter is very important. So you can imagine if you're shifting 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and then you want to get into 7th gear, if you've got the shifter mounted in this orientation, 7th gear is actually going to be through that lockout over towards the left-hand side. And that's going to be the same regardless of whether you've got the shifter mounted on the left-hand side or the right-hand side of your rig. So the correct way to actually mount this guy on your rig is to have it facing this direction. So the back of the rig back here, the steering wheel on this side, and then you can imagine as we go through the gears, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we push further to get into our 7th gear and then reverse down the bottom. That is the correct way to do it. So it is very important, and I've seen a couple of reviewers get this wrong, to actually have this mounted correctly in your rig facing in this orientation with the seat at the back and the steering wheel at the front. Now, because of how big and chunky this thing is, I know a lot of people are going to be wanting to mount it in this orientation. So it is actually possible to do so. You just have to make a couple of alterations internally. So you can get in touch with Billy and Dave and they'll explain how to do that. One of the things that I was a little bit disappointed by with this was that they don't include any sort of instruction manual to guide you through doing these things yourselves. I think part of the reason for that is that they want people to get in touch with them so they can explain it properly, rather than having people attempt something and potentially cause issues, because there is a lot of internal workings and bits and pieces in this. It is quite easy to mess things up. So takeaway here, by default, you will want to have it mounted in this orientation so that your 1st gear is on the left-hand side and your 7th gear and reverse are on the right-hand side. And that is obviously the same regardless of whether you're driving a right-hand drive car with the shifter on the left or a left-hand drive car with the shifter on the right, like what we do in Australia. Now, the other thing I think is important to highlight here is that if you do mount it in the incorrect orientation, you will find that while you're driving, you tend to accidentally go into 7th gear or reverse gear, depending on how you've got them mapped, while you're trying to shift into 1st or 2nd, because with the tension, and it will depend on how you have the tension set. At the moment, I've got it set to the lightest setting, just so I can show you how the movement works. But what you'll find is if you're aggressively shifting into 1st gear, you'll push too far and ultimately end up going into those extra 2 gears. So it is very important to have that orientation correct. So let's talk about adjustment now. That is all done through this adjustment screw here. So we don't have any adjustment in terms of throw distance. We do have adjustment for tension though, and it's a very, very linear adjustment here. So at the moment, I've got it set to pretty much the absolute minimum. You can see that screw is very loose there. It's right on the cusp of coming undone. And at the moment, you can see it almost just falls into each gear. Very, very simple to click into each position. As we wind that screw in, it adds tension in a very linear fashion. So it's not like having steps in the adjustment. You can basically wind it in to be as stiff or as loose as you want, and anywhere in between. So you can see now it's at least got a click in each position. As we wind it in further, we have to start putting more and more and more effort into actually changing gears. And you can actually wind this in so far that it almost becomes impossible to, I won't be able to do it on the table, but we'll wind it in just to show you anyway. So even on the rig, I have to put in a massive, I mean, I can't even do it on the table now. That's how stiff it goes. And it can still go beyond that as well. So there's no way you're not going to be able to find a setting that suits your particular personal preference subjectively. But for me, I do like to have it relatively stiff. I like it to be an intentional movement, but not necessarily an explosive muscle input, if that makes sense. So about there is right for me, but everybody's going to be different there. The important takeaway is that it's fully adjustable, so you will absolutely be able to find something that suits you. I should also mention as well that depending on where you buy one of these guys from, it'll either come with or have the option to purchase separately a couple of different length shafts as well, so you can actually extend the factory shaft or shorten it as well if you wish to do so. And in case you're wondering, it is a genuine Motomech shift knob that they include here. You do have the choice of ordering with a white or a black depending on your personal preference, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is a Delrin material, so it doesn't feel cold to the touch, but it does have a really nice smooth feeling to it. Absolutely no complaints there whatsoever. Now, if you do want to change over the shift knob, it's a M10 by 1.5 thread that you'll find here. So you can put any M10 by 1.5 shift knob on here if you do choose to change that out. So let's talk more now about mounting options. Now, we already talked about the importance of correct orientation here and the impact that that has on selecting the correct gears. So what we have down here is a 200mm by 78mm aluminium plate, and that has got a couple of slots here, as you can see, for mounting directly to a piece of aluminium profile. So you have the option of just bolting it directly on like so, and you can see that's going to line up and give you the option to move it in or out a little bit if you wish to as well. So it is easiest to mount one of these on an aluminium profile rig, and that's the way it's intended to be done. It does come supplied with 4 of these M8 bolts, including washers and some little spring ball type T-nuts as well. So all the mounting hardware that you're likely to need is all included. So it is possible to actually rotate the shift in 90 degrees within the mount, so you can kind of have it bolted onto the side here and have the shifter facing upwards, of course. The way that you essentially achieve that is by undoing the 8 bolts on the top here, but then you also need to undo the bottom and make a few adjustments here in terms of the electronics assembly just to get everything lined up correctly. So again, I'm not going to demonstrate that here because I don't want people to copy what I'm doing here and end up damaging something. Just get in touch with BDH if you do want to rotate the orientation, and they'll talk you through the process there. But from what I understand, you can mount on the inside of profile on your right hand side, so like that, or on the outside of profile on the left-hand side of your rig, but you can't go on the inside on this side or the outside on this side, if that makes sense. So you can rotate it that way, but you can't rotate it that way, and that's just due to limitations with the length of the wiring and how the electronic assembly actually fits in against the body of the shifter. So just keep that in mind too, but just get in touch with them if you do plan to adjust the orientation. Now, while we're discussing mounting here, the physical size of this thing is going to be an important factor for a lot of people as well. So let me just quickly give you the dimensions. So the height is 300mm. That is with the default shaft installed. Length is 300mm as well. Width is 80mm, and the weight, in case you were wondering, is 3.5 kilograms. So let's get in now and talk about what this is actually like to drive with.
Starts to right, 60. Good luck. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And to right, half long, 60.
Now, the thing that's notoriously difficult to get right inside a sim racing shifter is the sensation of gears mechanically moving inside a gearbox, the synchromesh engaging, all those little intricacies that you feel that make you feel connected to a car in real life. And one of the reasons why people love driving a manual car so much, you just feel that sense of connection with the car. You really kind of start to feel like you're at one with the car, and it becomes like an extension of your body. So to have a really immersive sim racing experience, those are the kinds of characteristics that you're wanting to try and bring across into the sim. And I'm happy to say that more so than any other shifter that I've ever tried in the past, this achieves that. So you really do get a feeling of something mechanically moving inside the assembly here when you shift into different gears, and all the little nuances that kind of come along with that. So in a real life car, we've actually got some footage here that we shot inside my Emira that you see behind me, just showing how much play there is in the gear shifter and how much movement there is when you're engaging the different gears. So at least in every single manual car that I've ever driven in my life, and I have driven a lot of manual cars, there's always that little bit of lash or that little bit of movement in the shifter arm, and that's exactly what we have here as well. Now, that's necessary because of the way the gears actually interact inside the assembly here. So if you didn't have that little bit of lash in the movement here, what would happen is those gears would bind up and you'd risk breaking the teeth off. So I have actually seen one review of this particular shifter where the guy did make an adjustment internally to tighten that up and did actually remove that lash in the stem, but that does risk internal damage. So that's certainly not something that BDH recommend or I would recommend anybody doing. And look, to me, it does feel quite authentic, but if that little bit of lash there is something that does bother you, then maybe this isn't going to be the shifter for you. If we can cross compare to some of the other shifters here, one of the things that I noticed about the MME shifter is that it has pretty much absolutely no real meaningful movement there at all. There's a tiny little bit from side to side, but forward to back, pretty much absolutely nothing. Likewise with the SimMagic, very minimal movement here, quite a lot more on the Fanatic shifter. But what I would say here is that the Fanatic shifter just kind of feels like it's flopping around. I mean, there is some spring tension there. It's not completely loose, but it feels much more floppy in that movement than what we have here. This just feels a lot more authentic and a lot more mechanical. Now, the sensation of actually moving into gear as well, as I mentioned, it really does have that. It's very difficult to describe, but it's not like a two-stage click or anything like that. It is only one kind of click into position, but there's this texture to it. There's this mechanical sensation of something moving inside the assembly. You feel like you're pulling something into position rather than it just being a clunk or a click into each position. And that's something that I've never felt in any other shifter that I've tested. So if we move across to the MME, for example, this is a very, very good shifter, and it does have the advantage of being able to move into sequential mode as well. But to shift into each gear here, it does have a nice, solid mechanical clunk to it. It does feel quite authentic in that sense. The amount of mechanical resistance fighting against you is quite authentic and everything, but it just doesn't have that same feeling of actually moving something inside a gearbox. Likewise, if we were to have a look at the SimMagic as well, again, very, very, very good shifter. And there are some things that I really like about this, even over what we have here. But again, you do feel a good amount of tension here as you move into each gear, but it doesn't have that same sensation of actually mechanically moving a gear into position. And likewise with the Fanatic as well. I mean, we've talked about this many times before. This does have quite a nice clunk to it. And one of the things you might notice is we've actually put a short shifter arm on this to improve the feeling of it a little bit. We had a video on that we did a long time ago, but unfortunately these aren't available anymore. But again, just doesn't have anywhere near the same genuine mechanical feel that what we have with the BDH shifter. So it does have a much more immersive and authentic feel overall to any other shifter that I've driven with in the past. One thing that I noticed in particular, which kind of had me puzzled at first, I don't know if you guys have ever misshifted inside your sim and kind of wondered what exactly you did wrong. So you feel like you've done everything right. It feels mechanically the same as every other shift you've done, but for some reason it just hasn't gone into gear and you've ended up bouncing off the limiter in neutral. What I found with this shifter, and I haven't quite wrapped my head around exactly what this is, but I actually felt physically like I misshifted with this shifter when it misshifted inside the game, whereas with every other shifter that I've ever used, it kind of left me scratching my head as to what I'd done wrong. So I don't know whether it's just that little extra bit of feeling in the mechanical movement or exactly what it is, because obviously it is mechanically going into the gear just the same as it is with any of these other ones. But whether it's the amount of time spent in neutral or whether I've let the clutch out a little bit too early or not quite timed my inputs correctly, you know, it's always a little bit different. But yeah, all I can tell you is that when I did misshift on this shifter, for the most part at least, it did actually feel like I'd done something wrong, and it kind of just made sense in my head. And yeah, that adds a lot to the immersion overall, simply because, you know, it's all kind of just meshing and all just kind of doing what it needs to do. Whereas with these guys, I feel like when everything's going right, it feels, you know, good and immersive and everything's just kind of okay. But then when you do misshift, you're kind of just like, well, what happened there? It doesn't really make sense, and it can kind of break the immersion. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a very difficult thing to explain. But yeah, that is one little thing in terms of immersion that I definitely noticed driving with this shifter over any other shifter that I've ever used in the past. So to summarize the experience overall, it's hard to explain here because it's not a absolutely massive difference between the feeling of something like this and something like the MME or the SimMagic shifter, for example. The Fanatec one is definitely more on the entry level in terms of the feeling, the sensation that you get, and the authenticity that you feel through the shifter. But look, both the SimMagic and the MME shifters do a very good job. They both have the advantage of being able to switch into a sequential mode right here on the shifter as well. So you don't have to have a separate sequential shifter on your rig with either of these. They do also have the advantage of a slightly smaller footprint as well, which may be important to some people, but neither of these give you the same authentic feeling of actually mechanically moving something inside a gearbox like this guy does. So if that's the most important thing to you, then yeah, you are getting what you pay for here in terms of the feeling, but just don't expect it to be some massive game-changing thing for the majority of your driving. I think when you're just slamming through gears and you're just going through the motions of normal driving, then it doesn't feel massively different to some of the more upmarket shifters like the MME that we've looked at in the past. Now, there are a couple of things that I do prefer about the SimMagic design in particular over what we have here. So we covered earlier how the lockout system on this works and the importance of the orientation on your rig. Otherwise you run into the issue of when you're aggressively shifting into first and second gear, accidentally going into reverse or seventh gear. Now, the way they've done it on the SimMagic shifter is really clever. They've got this collar, which you actually have to pull up to shift into reverse or seventh and eighth gear. So you've got your standard H-Pattern 6 here. Then if you want to get into reverse, you pull the collar up and move it across onto the left-hand side and up into reverse. If you want to get into seventh and eighth gear, same kind of deal. You pull over to the right and seventh and eighth gear. So you actually have 9 positions in total with this shifter. But the important thing here is that unless you pull up that collar, you can't physically get it into those positions, which means that you're not accidentally going to be shifting into reverse or seventh and eighth gear, regardless of how you have this oriented on your rig, which I do think is a better way of doing things overall and something that I hope we see on future versions of this particular shifter. So there definitely are a couple of things that I think can be improved with the BDH shifter. I think in terms of what it's setting out to achieve, it does do a very, very good job, and it does have that very authentic feel. Whether or not it's worth the extra money over something like the SimMagic shifter, that's completely subjective. It's going to be completely up to you. I would say for me, this is the best value for money shifter that I've tested to date. I think that they do an absolutely fantastic job with it. Is this good value for money? Look, in terms of the quality of the workmanship, the quality of the materials, what you're getting in terms of a piece of artwork, I guess you could call it, then yeah, absolutely it is worth the money. I can see where the cost is in a product like this much more than I can in some other sim racing products that cost as much as this. So yeah, if that's the kind of thing that's important to you, then absolutely the value is there. In terms of the driving experience, honestly, it really is just a subjective thing. For me, I think I would probably struggle to justify the cost of this thing, given some of the sacrifices that we're making. If it had an integrated sequential mode, if it had that lockout system like what we have here, then yeah, I think I probably would fork out the money to buy something like this because it does have that additional authentic feeling to it. But I want to have something that's a little bit more all-rounder on my sim rig. I like to be able to alternate between sequential and H-Pattern very easily because I do drive a lot of different cars very frequently. I don't want to be having to pull things on and off my daily driver rig to facilitate changing between different cars. So for what it is, it definitely does do an excellent job. It's definitely the best feeling H-Pattern shifter that I've ever felt on a sim rig at least by a long shot. But I'm certainly not going to sit here and overhype this thing, make out that it's some absolutely incredible game-changing thing that everybody should aspire to own. I think the best way I can probably summarize this is that if you're looking for a really authentic feeling H-Pattern shifter for your sim rig, then this does a really, really excellent job. But it's certainly not a product that I would recommend for absolutely everybody to aspire to own. I think that for future versions, if they can reduce the footprint a little bit, improve that lockout and make it easily interchangeable between H-Pattern and sequential mode, then I would definitely be prepared to spend my own hard-earned cash on it. And I think it's as simple as that, guys. So I really hope that today's video has helped you out. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel as well so you don't miss out on future reviews like this one. And if you do want to pick up any of the gear that you've seen in today's video, we do have some affiliate links down in the description below. Those are an awesome way of helping support our work here at Boosted Media at no additional cost if you find what we do here of value and you want to help support us. So we really do appreciate your support there. But above all, thank you very much for watching and we will see you again very soon. Bye.